Hello again, welcome to the Ref Show. We have a new face joining us this week. Delighted to welcome Mark Halsey, a new old face. But we're very familiar and needs no introduction, joining our resident expert, Keith Hackett. Well, there's an awful lot to talk about during the international break. A breather from football, don't you believe it? We really have got some discussion points this week for you. A goalkeeper commits 2 red card offences and stays somehow on the field. Good penalty claims are ignored, seemingly. And what's happened to our assistant referees? There seems to be a genuine concern on that front. But some good things as well. Let that be acknowledged straight away. Some good performances. Actually, Keith, we had a successful refereeing debut in the Premier League.
Great to see a new face come on. He's come from nowhere. I mean, I've seen his
This is Paul Tierney.
Yes, I mean, I've seen his profile, and you think, well, they've not really built up to that. You have to ask the question, if they're going to use him, why haven't they made the decision to make him a full-time professional referee? And they could have done that in the summer. I'm sure they must have had an inkling as to what Howard Webb was going to do after the World Cup. So I think they could have prepared and planned a bit better. But nonetheless, here's a young guy, fresh face. What I really liked was his pace. At long last, we're seeing some referees capable, a new referee capable of putting in sprints. I've seen him personally last year and the year before in the Football League, and I've been impressed by his decisions. So, good.
Excellent. Paul Tierney, who handled the Swansea game at the weekend, a convincing home win. Maybe also Anthony Taylor, Mark. Leicester Arsenal seemed to pass without incident, and he seemed to get some credit for that.
Yeah, I think Anthony's coming into his own. He's been on a couple of seasons now, and it's all about managing the event, managing the occasion. In his first few seasons, he made 1 or 2 errors. He made a few big errors last season, but he seemed to put that behind him. And it does take time from moving from the Football League up into the Premier League. And I think, touched on Paul Tierney, it's going to take 2 or 3 years for them to bed into this league. And it's all about managing them right and giving them the right games. You speak about Paul Tierney. I mean, that was a great game to give him. Swansea, West Brom, 2 easy teams. You don't get no problems with those teams, and it was great that they put Paul into that. And it's the same with Anthony. He's learned his trade. He's had 2 seasons now, 3 seasons in the Premier League, and now perhaps he needs to be kicking on and refereeing some of these big A games that we call, the big Manchester derbies, Man United, Liverpool's, and Man United, Arsenal. So that's where we've got to do, because at the moment we've only got about 4 referees that could handle those big games. And when I was around, we had a lot more than that. You normally had about 12, 13 referees that could handle those games, but at the moment we've only got 4. So we do need to bring some new faces, some new blood up into and managing these games.
Well, the names that keep recurring on this side for reliability, consistency and quality of refereeing, Mark Clattenburg and Mike Dean. You make the point they should have the big games. And Mike Dean had West Ham Southampton last weekend. I think he refereed it by common consent pretty well. Mark Clattenburg had a low-key game as well, Aston Villa Hull. Keith?
It just surprises me. I mean, you've got one of the world's best referees. Let's make no mistake, he's now in number 1 position in England, and he needs to be out in the big games. And when I looked at Everton, Chelsea, then I have to say my first thoughts were, that's a Clattenburg appointment, and it didn't come through. I'm not being derogatory to Villa or other teams, but he needs the big games. He's going to Euros. He's going to do the Euro Championships. He's got to be in line for that, and therefore the people and powers that be at PGMOL have got to recognise that and prepare him for that. That's what I did with Webb. That's what I did with Paul before.
Okay, Everton Chelsea is a major talking point for us, because there's any number of incidents from that. First of all, I think we all stand back and say, what a fantastic game of football it was. I mean, if anybody doesn't know, it was Everton 3, Chelsea 6.
But that's what makes the Premier League so great. The best league in the world. We have games like that. But I just want to go back on what Keith said. He's absolutely spot on. You've got to put your best referees on the big games, and that's what it's all about. And that's all the clubs ask. And I say Keith is absolutely spot on.
Why are we sitting here nitpicking over a 9-goal thriller when most of the country is saying, what a fantastic game of football? They're going to be talking more about that than they are about the refereeing, but we know that there were some fairly colossal
Well, let's put the base in first. I mean, I spent a number of years along with Philip Don, who was the first general manager of PGMOL, working hard to get professional refereeing into the structure of refereeing. We were the first country really to do it. Italy were there, but not in the way the PGMOL was formed. And the outcome is a lot of money is being invested, and we expect absolutely top level performances. And when we get into the Everton-Chelsea game, you know, I read Graham Poll, and you know, Graham has a balanced view now. He's matured. He's not always hammering the referees. He makes good points. He said, in his opinion, it was the worst refereeing performance he'd seen. Now, I know that was probably aimed at Ganfield, but I have to say also that I agree. It was a pretty awful performance.
Okay, Ron Ganfield being the official who was at the centre of much of it, Jonathan Moss, the referee. Where do you apportion blame between those two? Because we're talking here about a goal that should have been disallowed, Chelsea's second for offside. We're talking about a goalkeeper who twice should have seen red, handling outside the area, stopping a goal-scoring opportunity. Also violent conduct later in the game. There was another incident as well with a decision that went against Chelsea, I think, Diego Costa.
Well, I mean, to answer the point, first of all, to determine whether the ball's in and out of the penalty area is much in the hands of the assistant referee. He's got to be in the right position to make that judgment. I don't think, if he'd have been offline by 2 or 3 yards, short of getting to the best position, he could still see that goalkeeper was well outside the area. Now, you then take the referee, and the referee's looking down the channel, straight behind the back of the player, when in fact we say to him quite clearly, deviate a metre or 2 metres left or right to make certain that you can see the challenge on the goalkeeper. Or the challenge on the forward. Now in this situation, the goalkeeper's denied. It's a straight red. I mean, it's not even iffy.
Mark, you were known as a referee who liked, if at all possible, to keep all 22 players on the field. Your verdict?
I mean, Keith's right. I mean, as a referee, you're looking down that, and if you've got the backs of the players, and you've got to make an angle. Keith always drummed that into us. You've got to make an angle yourself. If it had gone either right or left, he would have clearly seen that Tim Howard was out of his box. Yeah, and it is all about managing the occasion, managing the players and managing the event. But there are some occasions, there are some instances that you just cannot manage, and that was one of them. And for me, John Moss showed his lack of experience there. As Keith rightly said, he shouldn't have. The game was too big for him. He's a lovely lad. He's learning his trade. He's been in a couple of years in the Premier League, but I just think that game was too big for John Moss to referee. And they should have got that. They should have been communicating between them. And John Moss should have been leading the conversation with Ron Ganfield, because if John would have made that angle, he wouldn't have needed an assistant referee.
Okay.
All he needed to do was just say, was that outside the box? And he would have come back and said, yes, it should have been. Yes, it was. Red card, and off he went for denying a goal.
Okay, on the other one, the Everton keeper survived that, and then of course we have the head-to-head. When he comes out.
I mean, we're quite clear on that. I mean, the managers have been told very clearly. I explained to them that hand on neck, hand on face is a clear red card offence. And in fairness to the managers, they took that on board. We've seen that almost gone out the game completely. You cannot use your forehead into the face of an opponent. And this doesn't have to be a massive movement. This is where he's rubbing heads with the opponent. He's put his head there and he's put his opponent in danger. Therefore, for me, it's a red card. It might seem harsh, but it's a red card.
Okay, and when we talk about harsh, we're again talking about diving this week or non-diving. We've had this go both ways in previous weeks. Now, this time we have a couple of players. Now, you, Keith, were at Manchester City Stoke, weren't you? And there were a couple of incidents there. El Hadj Diouf, who in the past has been described as a serial diver, arguably should have had a penalty for Stoke. And later, Yaya Toure of Manchester City was booked for diving, when I think on replay it looks a penalty. Keith?
I mean, I'm in the stadium. I'm some distance away. I thought Deuce was a clear penalty. It was an easy one. It was a trip. It was inside the area. There were people around me who Man City fans were smiling. I can tell you later in the game, when Yaya Toure was fouled inside the penalty area, no question, right? I'm expecting Lee to point to the penalty mark, and he goes and gives a yellow card. I mean, no wonder the Manchester City players and the spectators around me were like aghast, because it wasn't a difficult decision. And you know, let's just show a little bit of courage. These are massive decisions. These are big decisions. Mark will tell you that we always preach, and I don't care who the general manager is, we've always preached, get the big decisions right. The little ones will take care of themselves.
But these consistently are being wrong, and they are hard, aren't they, to detect cheating. Mark, I mean, you must have fallen foul of it a few times.
Yeah, I mean, simulation. I mean, I felt foul of it once, only once, where I awarded a penalty to Southampton against Villa. I mean, everyone thought it was a nailed-on penalty. Even the players, even the TV pundits thought it was a nailed-on penalty. But when you see it again, he did go down and simulated. So it's very difficult. But with Lee on that game, he was inconsistent. Now, if he cautions Yaya Toure, okay, for an act of simulation, then he's got to do Juve in the same manner. So, but he didn't. Now, football is a contact game. It's a contact sport, and it doesn't mean to say every bit of contact is a foul or a penalty or whatever it is. So if you don't think it's a foul, just play on, do nothing. You know, don't get involved. Don't draw yourself to that attention. Now, for me, they were two blatant penalties, but Lee hasn't given them. But don't caution one and don't caution the other. Okay. Now, he would have most probably he would have thought, oh well, that's simulation, so you do both. But for me, it's contact, it's a penalty. But if the referee doesn't feel it's a penalty, then just play on. Okay. Play on.
I agree with Mark entirely, because what you have to understand here is that yellow cards tot up. We might think, oh, it's only a yellow card, but in effect, at some point, there's a pinch point. It's usually around about Christmas, when there's a load of players suddenly got 5 cautions, and then they're automatically suspended.
And they
can't appeal on it.
Can I mention Ashley Young on balance? Mark?
Okay, can we come back to that?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
A week ago, because we were talking about diving, a week ago we panned him. Now, in fairness, I thought he was harshly dealt with this time, because my view was, no, you're the experts, Burnley, Manchester United, I thought he was fouled and should have been awarded a penalty. Mark, you're shaking your head.
No, I think, listen, I've just gone on about this doesn't mean contact, it's a foul or penalty. And I don't think that was enough to warrant a penalty. I think he goes down, he's got to be stronger there. He's gone down far too easy for me. He's done it to me before. And I've got to say, I'm with Chrissy Foy there. I don't think I would have given a penalty for that, I have to say.
I think it was a tight call. I think it's like everything else. If you're there and you've got the feel for the game, then, and the referee's in a good position, you go with the referee.
Yeah.
Okay. Coming back to your point.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about yellow cards. Keith was talking about yellow cards. Tottenham. We look at Costa, Diego Costa, from the Burnley game. Yeah. Okay, now that was never a yellow card. That was another nailed-on penalty that the referee should have given. And of course, Costa was cautioned again on Saturday for a little bit of nothing really, handbags, and John Moss didn't manage that situation. It wasn't a yellow card. It wasn't a yellow card for me. You've got to manage that situation. You've got to stamp your authority on the game. Let the players know, and that doesn't happen. You know, he goes in there and he stamps his authority. He tells him absolutely no more, and they behave and they get on with it. But I just thought it was a very cheap yellow card for Costa. So now he's got 2 yellow cards. And all of a sudden, you know, another couple he could be missing, and we don't want to see. We don't want to be missing these players. That's what we want. That's why the Premier League's so great. People want to go and see these players. It's not about the referee. It's about 22 players.
When I took over, I think I go back. We were averaging about 4.5 yellow cards a game. Germany was 5. Italy was moving towards 5. We didn't make a pledge, but we said, look, what we want to do as a group of referees is to scale back on the yellow cards and to manage more effectively. So we brought Craig Mahoney, the sports psychologist. He worked with the referees to get improvement in terms of body language, debate amongst players and referees, the management styles changing, and we saw those changes. And yellow cards went down to an average of less than 3. Now we're starting off giving them a bit too quickly.
Okay. Well, I'm not quite sure how we're doing for time, because we try to get through a lot of topics in this feature every week, and a lot of ground is covered. Must mention before we go, Phil Dowd, because there was a query raised as to why he made a late entry to the season. He took a championship game first, a week or two into the season, Middlesbrough, Sheffield Wednesday. Spurs 0, Liverpool 3. I was looking at ref cam, and by and large, he seemed to come out quite well. Keith, observations on
Yeah, I don't
one of
think
the
he's
biggest
fit
name
enough.
referees?
I thought he fatigued towards the end of the game. When a referee begins to fatigue, believe me, he then starts losing his position. He starts losing to some degree his confidence, and he exposes his performance in a negative manner. So these guys should breeze through it. You know, we saw him a season ago, I think. I mean, I was looking at the television and tapped the screen a couple of times because it wasn't the Phil Dowd I know. He'd lost the weight. His performances, you know, he's a reliable referee. Somebody's just got to hold him by the hand and say, look, we need you. Because Phil Dowd is an excellent referee. We need him, and he needs his management style and his skill sets. But at the moment, he just needs to cut back a bit on the pies, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Keith. I mean, I've got to say, I didn't think it was a penalty on Joe Allen. As I said, you know, it's a contact sport, and for me, that was far too easy a penalty. That was never a penalty for me in many years. But I've got to say, I think you've got to realise, as you get older, Keith, I think you've got to realise when your time's up, don't you? And you can always be in danger of going on too long. You know, then you're not remembered for the great referee
Is
you
Phil
was.
Dowd in that danger?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, he took the late fitness test. Now, I was told he took it behind closed doors. You can read into that what you like. Most probably did pass, but obviously you can read into that. And then he goes into Middlesbrough, Sheffield Wednesday. Okay, you know, there was a couple of decisions in that game. Was there? There was
Two penalties later.
Well, one was a penalty, and I didn't think the other was a handball. But the handball, that wasn't a penalty. Not for me anyway. I don't know if you saw it, but I didn't think that was a penalty. And then he gets thrown into a massive game. You know, Tottenham, Liverpool. You know, you're exposing Phil, aren't you? You're exposing him. You know, he's done one game. You put him straight into a Premier League game.
Okay, well,
manage him. As Keith said, you've got to manage him.
Let it be said to round up, Robert Madley, QPR Sunderland, I think was probably okay. It didn't stand out for any incidents. So we're trying to be balanced here.
Yeah.
You know, there were some good performances. Newcastle 3, Crystal Palace 3. Again, I think Mike Jones the perception was that he did pretty well. But just to finish, we had a discussion last week about assistant referees, and again we've had the spotlight on them this weekend, not least Ron Ganfield. What's your overall impression, Keith?
I think ageism, remember the law about age, legislation, you can no longer retire them at a given age, and I think that's now affecting the PGMOL. I think some of the guys are aging, and they're not admitting to themselves in the mirror that their time's up. And I think that, you know, I think also, in addition to that, they're probably missing the expertise of Paul Rigier, because Paul Rigier was a terrific assistant referee manager. And I think that Paul would have been knocking on my door saying, I need the money, I need to bring the guys in. Because I think, at the moment, they need to bring them back in, make use of Malarkey and Can and others to actually say, look, let's get the training right and let's get back to this video clips and examining their offside decisions.
Mark was nodding furiously.
I agree. I agree with Keith. I think that, you know, they've missed Paul Rigier. I think that the man they've got in place now as the referee, the assistant manager, Adam Watt, I don't think he's good enough. I don't think he's got the experience to do that. You know, he retired early because of an injury, couldn't pass his fitness test. And we've got the likes of Phil Sharp, we've got our own Glenn Turner, absolutely fantastic assistants. Been all around the world. You know, been in all sorts of tournaments. Yeah. Why are we not using their expertise with the current crop of assistant referees now? Okay.
Mark Halsey, Keith Hackett, many thanks. We could go on as ever for
Yes.
a great deal longer. Thank you as ever for joining us for the Ref Show. We're going to take a short international break of our own, but we'll be back with this feature in a fortnight. Many thanks. Bye now.